from Heart of the City, San Diego, and the Gloria Madrano podcast, and I am live. Hi, what's up? I'm about 20 minutes late because I was on Facebook talking to everyone, um, doing a live over there, and I hadn't been there for a while. But as you know, we're on the topic of grieving, um, and I usually talk a lot about grieving during the during the holidays and stuff, because it's during the holidays when we are reminded, of our loved ones who aren't there anymore. Um, you know, the traditions, the things we looked forward to, and all of that. Um, I was, as I teach these lessons, I start to think about things. I ponder on the subject, and I try to kind of get in tune with my feelings, what I feel, what I remember, what I've learned, and I start to, kind of think about that, what I want to say to everyone about that subject. Um, you know, I How do I know about grieving? Grieving in my family is an interesting thing, um, and it's completely different in a lot of people's homes. Um, but I um, grew up in a family that was infested with drugs, um, drug abuse. Okay, and now I didn't do drugs. I'm not a drinker and never was. Okay, but I grew up in a family environment that was very much like that. Okay, and then I went into foster care. So I have this crazy story. I'm not going to get all into that today, but I want to try to paint a picture of how I know about grieving. Okay, so there have been more than 7 people in my family who died of overdoses. And all of them, I've probably seen them overdose at least once. They didn't die at that time, but later on they did, die of an overdose. So I know I've seen a lot of stuff growing up, and in way of, drugs and alcohol. So, this is why I teach what I teach. This is why I come on here, creating an awareness, letting you know out there, people who are struggling with substance abuse, and you know, um, they may have addictions and things like that. Um, I want you to know that there's hope. Okay, that there's hope. I am grateful and thankful that my mom and my aunt both got clean when I was young, when I was still young. Okay. Um, my mom, I think she was 30 when she got started getting 35 or something like that. Yeah, when she got clean. Um, and at that, I think I was maybe 18 at that time. Um, and I'm grateful, for that. And it was, the lifestyle was horrible. It was tough. It was dangerous. It was, and my dad was a biker. It was, there was a lot of craziness in it. So, but I want you to know, when I turned 20, I started going to church, and I got to I do I became a Christian. I accepted Jesus Christ into my heart, and and I turned away from the lifestyle that could have come my way. It was going pretty dark. I was getting involved. I was just getting involved in a lot of stuff that was not good stuff, and so I understand grief. Okay. My dad died when I was overseas in England. He was sick, and I was able to come back from England, fly in, and I spent 2 weeks with him. I got to spend 2 weeks with him, and then while I was here in San Diego visiting, he died. And I'm grateful that the way that God did it, He took care of me. He took care of all of my needs. He allowed me to see my dad. God did, allowed me to visit with him, spend time with him, tell him that I forgive him, love on, just, share love with each other. And then my dad was at peace to transition to heaven. And I'm grateful for that. Not everyone gets to have that. But the grieving part of that was insane, because at the same time, when I was losing my dad, I was also losing my marriage. Okay. And so I found out all kinds of craziness. And then, I went through a divorce. And then, I didn't even get to grieve. I didn't even get to grieve anything, or, so what I did was I started to figure out, how am I going to move back? Because nobody was helping me. How am I going to move back? I'm there with my kids, and what am I going to do? So I started making phone calls and trying to figure this out. How is this all going to take place? What am I going to do? And so I got some help, barely, and then I got abandoned, and then I started to rebuild. I landed in San Diego, and I started to rebuild my life, but I still didn't really grieve. This was years had passed, maybe 5 years passing. 5 years goes fast when you're, transitioning from one country to another country and dealing with all kinds of stuff. So I didn't even get to grieve. So I'm sitting there, and one day, I finally get a little place, a little home, and I'm sitting there in my home, and it hits me, and I fall on the ground, and I'm crying. And people would have thought I was crazy. And, I in fact, when people hear this story, they say things to me like, people listen in, and they'll say, crazy lady or something like that. And just like, that's so mean. But I started crying. And I was grieving. I was grieving the loss of my dad, and the loss of a marriage, and, and starting to rebuild. My mom walked in and found me on the ground, crying, and she said, my mom is the sweetest lady ever. She's just always sweet, happy, and she never gets mad anymore. I remember her back when I was a kid. She used to get mad and pull my hair, okay, and kick me. But she's gangster. But I never seen her mad again after so many years. But this particular time when I was on the ground crying, the homegirl got down on the ground with me, and she said, get up right now. She yelled at me, Gloria, get up right now. Or else I'm gonna kick your ass. And um, so I got up, and she said, "You're stronger than this. You're better than this." She said, "This is not like you." And she said, "F those people." She said, "F those people." And then she said, "You could do this." And I did. And I did. I rebuilt my life and developed a podcast, developed a ministry, Heart of the City, San Diego, and, and still from time to time I do grieve, because I didn't get to grieve properly. The grieving process is not going to be like, the same as everybody's for you or me. It's all going to be different. So give yourself grace to grieve. If it hits you, sometimes you get blindsided. Sometimes you didn't even know it was coming. You just like suddenly you're just walking, you're walking down the street and you just feel overwhelmed. Something reminds you, a smell or something, and you're just like, oh my God, and it hits you hard. And it's okay. It's okay. That's going to happen. Okay. So, I see you guys there. Hi. Thanks for tuning in. So, in the next couple of lessons, we're going to talk a little bit about grief. Okay. And, I've been talking a lot about comforting others. We went through a whole year of self-awareness and things like that, biblical self-awareness and stuff. And you can read 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4. And basically it's just saying that, praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, that God is a compassionate God for you and me, okay? And that he sees our troubles. He comforts us in our troubles. And that same comfort that God comforts us with, go and comfort others, okay? Be someone who is able to comfort others. And I even tell men this, okay? I tell this to men, like, if you want to date a girl and you want to be a better man, learn to be a comforter. Learn to be someone who knows how to comfort someone, okay? I have run into so many men, and they have no clue. There's no clue, no awareness. Some of them very fit, some of them, they have, they know how to be in the gym, but they have no clue how to talk to a woman. And it's mind blowing. But the bottom line in how to, be a man that, cares for women is learn how to be someone who is a comforter. Learn how to comfort others. Excuse me. And you learn that by reading the word. Read the word and what it says. Don't be a hater. There's a lot of men that hate women. Especially women that are doing something, something big or something, something productive in the world. Men feel like in competition with this, and there's no need for competition. What there needs to be is camaraderie, companionship. That's what there needs to be. To come alongside of someone, to help, to befriend, and for it to be a great life, not a competitive life, but you make it that when you feel threatened. But why do you feel threatened? That would be the question you would ask yourself as a man. Why would you feel threatened? I mean, together you could both build, an empire. Do you know what I mean? To meet a woman who's, on, can make it on her own, and and then wants to partner up with you, that you can like build an amazing life together. But instead, there's a lot of like inferiority complex. It's too much work. It's too competitive. I got to be better, stronger. And that all of that is not even necessary. It's all within inside of your own thought life. But I would say the first thing to do is to learn how to comfort others. Be someone who just cares, that you care about others. That you see something in someone. There's so many. There's also good men that I run into that not people that like I want to date or anything like that, but like just people that I see in general. This is what I do for a living, so I observe people, and other men that I see, and I'm like this guy is such a great person. He sees a need, he takes care of it. He sees someone sad, he's there for them. He's like he feels people's burdens, and he carries their burdens. And I'm like, you're how old? Like, you know what I mean? And it's a young man, and I'm like, dude, and girls don't want that. They're just like, you're just like, what do you want? You want some dumb kid who's, still off going to, ditching work to go to a punk rock show. You know what I mean? When you could be having this dude, and you're just like, what is with this? So it's both men and women, younger men and women, and it's like, what do young women want? They just want some cute guy that has no sense. And I'm kind of being silly here, but this is kind of things that I've observed along the way. Okay. And I'm here to tell you that, you can change that just by being someone who, can comfort others, to, that can carry the weight of someone. And it doesn't mean like you have to like, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's such a burden, and like, all this stuff, then man, I don't know, like, you don't want a woman. you I don't know what you want, but like, because most women, you're gonna have to, talk things out. There's a real person in front of you. You have to, there's communication levels. There's, like, what do you want out of people? It's so like bizarre, and it's like, what do you want? Just somebody who's just like empty inside, like dull, and they're just a dork, and they don't have any substance, um, or like, do you want someone who's, wise, has some depth, has some, something to bring to the table, experience, what, like honestly, and there's too much on both ends. There's too much of this conversation about narcissism. That narcissism is just, people talk about narcissism because it gives some of these people, social media people, money, following and money and stuff, you know. And it, you know, the word narcissist, not everyone is a narcissist. They might be a jerk, but a narcissist is a pretty big, you know, thing to call someone. And it requires a, you know, therapist to diagnose it. You know, it just isn't someone who's just being a jerk. Do you know what I mean? Um, so that word narcissist, don't throw that around so easily. Not every man is a narcissist. Not every woman is a narcissist. You know, not every social media influencer is a narcissist. You know, but you know, they may have an ego. They may have, you know, a chip on their shoulder. They might have, you know, too much pride or whatever. But probably not narcissism. Narcissism is really big. So, you know, in this whole thing with comforting others, I want you to kind of think about that. Think about, you know, how, like, you know, if you're a woman, you know, how do you feel about men? Like, I'm talking to women and I'm like, they want to go out on a date or whatever, but they hate men. like, like, the whole conversation is about how bad men are. And I'm like, you know, they're not all like bad. They're not all bad, you know. They have issues. There's some issues there, you know. We all have issues, you know, from hurt or whatever that we can plainly see. Women see all that. Women are not dumb. But then there's also men who are like, you know, they can't get a date. They're, you know, even if they're handsome and fit, they're, you know, they are so scared and suspicious of women. And it's like, well, like, what do you want? Like, what are you expecting? AI? Like, what, you know, like, you know, we do have a brain and, you know, feelings, and a conversation needs to be taking place. But, like, you know, it's bizarre. So I would say, you know, for those of you who are listening, because there are some people that do listen, and you are, you know, you're waiting eagerly for me to say something about dating advice. But I would say, like, chill out, a bit, you know, just calm down, chill out, and take it easy. Like, you know, it's stop being scared. You're not getting young, you know, and if you're gonna make that move, you better make that move. Like, you know, don't like, you know, linger. When you linger too long, you know, it's not flattering anymore. It's just like, oh, you're hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold, and women don't. No woman likes that. Okay, so don't be that guy that is hot and cold, hot and cold, and then you just linger. You kind of linger, you know. That's kind of like lukewarm. And I'm making a face because I'm just being a dork, but it's not, you know, you're not a bad person because of it. You just don't know. You just don't know. It's hard to know what to do. And so I always make this face like that. So it's don't mind me that I'm making that face. I'm not, you know, nothing grosses me out. But I am saying this because, you know, you guys are great. You guys are amazing. And, you know, do you know, like, there are so many, maybe not so many, but like, there's one or two guys that, you know, I'm like, because I'm on social media and things like that. So it's a little bit more scary to kind of ask me out, you know. But there are people that I know, that I'm in their small groups at church or whatever, guys who liked me, and they never asked me out, but I knew that they liked me, and uh, I would have said yes. I would have said yes, you know, and they basically will never know now. They will never know now, because at the end of the day, they didn't they didn't make the move. Okay. And somebody like me, who has a good head on her shoulders, and there's a lot of women that are like me, that we're not young. We are straight to the point, and it's no, we're not young, and we like we like to it to just we like it to be straight to the point. you know we like things to be not like hot and cold, hot and cold. Definitely not that. Okay. um and and the lingering, there's a lot of there I've encountered some situations where there was lingering, and you're like, and then that lingering, but what happens is that lingering then leads that man to be mad at you. And you're like, I'm not a man, I'm not going to ask you out, like, you know what I mean? And you're like, well, I don't understand what you want from me, because, like, you don't like women who are like men, but then you don't want to ask them out, and then you get mad because they don't ask you out, and then you want them to not be, you want them to be traditional, and then you're just like, okay, like, come on. Like, if you're gonna ask the girl out, just ask her out. You know what I mean? And see what happens. And it might be no at first. It might be no at first, because why should it be yes? You don't know them, right? But have a conversation, start talking to them and stuff, and then ask them again. And probably the second time, maybe the third time, it'll be probably yes. Somebody's comment. I see you guys saying stuff. No, but seriously though, like, it's don't make it so complicated. It doesn't have to be like that. And definitely, maybe I'm not going to share that part, but well, I was going to say, like, you don't want, like some girls aren't going to want to go out with somebody that they don't know for drinks. Definitely not a Christian lady is going to want to go out for drinks. Do you know what I mean? To go out for drinks. um, you know, you may go out, and there might be a drink, but to say let's go out for drinks is not, something that you would ask a Christian woman out to go do, to go for coffee or something, or go for a walk or something. Maybe yes, but it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for fast, then fast is what you're going to get. Bottom line. And fast don't last. So fast doesn't last. And that's basically how it all boils down. That's what you're going to get. And I know that that's not what people really want. I know that that's not. You know, I know that people want substance. I know that people want, you know, a lasting um, relationship, you know. And I know that there are lots of people that follow me who are single, you know, that they're, you know, hoping that I say, because I talk a lot about, you know, the Word of God and healing. And, you know, lately I'm talking about grief and comforting others. But, you know, you guys know that I'm going to throw something in there, you know, about, you know, how to approach a lady or something, you know, how to ask someone out, or especially a Christian lady, because a lot of men don't know how to ask a Christian lady out. They want to go out with a Christian lady, but they don't know. They're scared to death. They don't know what to do. Ay, ay, ay. Also, here's another little thing, like, you know, some of the stuff that you guys put on your social media, like, and you want someone to go out with you, and you got stuff on your social media that is like, you know, I know that you want, like, if you want to put like all kinds of, you know, stuff that isn't about you on your social media, do a whole different social media thing. But if it's your own personal social media, you know, put something that is your own personal life on your social media so that people could, because people, that's how people see you. They're going to look you up. They're going to go, oh, yeah, no, that sounds very mean and hateful, you know. um, or yikes, oh, no, you know, if you're like that about that, you might treat me like that. uh, and that might not be how how they are or how they're intended. They're just popping stuff on their social media that doesn't have anything to do with, you know, with them, but they posting things about, you know, uh, other people or the war or something like that. Um, it's not just, it's a lot of guys that do that. Um, be aware of that, you know, because girls do go to your social media and they look at it, you know, and if they don't see something that is that looks safe enough to go out with you with, they're not going to give you any attention because they're going to be like, oh, okay, that looks kind of scary. Um, you know, so, you know, post post if you're posting things that aren't about you, post puppies and kittens and, you know, ponies. That'll draw women's attention, okay? um, so anyway, grief, this is the second part, and it says this: here's the question, how long is this grief going to last? How long is this grief going to last? And the bottom line is, no one really has the answer to that question, because we all are different, okay? Sometimes we're bombarded with thoughts that cause us to grieve. Other times we're doing okay. And then, you know, suddenly, you know, the Christmas season comes around and it's hard, okay? Um, Sometimes it feels like a roller coaster, you know, and you're like, man, I thought I got past that. And then, bam, you're just like blindsided, you know. Um, Sometimes there's setbacks, you know. Be gracious with yourself if there's a setback. Um, Sometimes it might cause you to go drink. Sometimes it might cause you to go do drugs. But you don't want to spiral into that again. It's, because that's a bad place to be when you start spiraling, into that after you've gotten clean, and then you fall back into that. Um, you know, uh, stand your ground. Feel the pain. We all have to feel the pain of that. It's painful, very painful. But we learn things through pain. If we numb it, we won't know what that feels like. We won't even know how to comfort others. And I think that's the biggest problem when it comes to people or men, is a lot of times men were taught to just numb it by drinking, numb it by drugs, numb it by, you know, um, fitness, numb it by, other things, whatever it might be, hobbies or whatever. Numb it. And if we don't know what that particular thing feels like emotionally or anything, then we don't know how to help others. We won't know how to help others. We will just be there. We'll just be like, okay, what do I do next? You wouldn't know what to do. But if you felt it yourself, then you know what that's like. Okay, you know that, hey, this is like a roller coaster ride. Not everyone gets over it fast. You know that, just nothing that you say or do can fix it. You know that because you've been through it. You felt it, right? You felt someone trying to help you. But you liked someone being there, right? So you liked the company, but you didn't need someone telling you what to do. That part you didn't like, okay? No one really likes that. So, have grace with yourself, but also have grace with others. And you learn to have grace because of comforting others, okay? Because of how God comforted you, or someone has been by your side when you were going through tough times, okay? Don't like shame people. Don't shame people, okay? Because shaming people doesn't bring them into awareness. It brings them, they're going to feel it already, okay? They're going to feel the pain of the loss of what they did or didn't do, okay? Or how they did something or whatever. They're going to feel the shame of that already. They feel the weight of that already, okay? Grace is what is going to open the door. And I'm going to say this again. Grace is what is going to open the door for them to come into Jesus Christ, to come into the place where you are, to come into the place of healing, to come into the place of, being okay with grieving, knowing that they missed out on a certain part of someone's life. We all didn't do things right. There was a lot of loss in my life with my dad. I didn't do everything right, but he didn't either. And so there could have been some shame. There could have been some shame if someone would have said to me, shame on you for not being there. Shame on you for missing out on this part. Shame on you for this. I would probably beat them up. I probably would beat them up. I probably wouldn't want them in my life. I probably would be very, very angry with that statement. I probably would be, you know, not in their life. But grace and love opens the door. Grace and love allows for healing. Grace says, I see all of that stuff that could have been and it wasn't. And we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. It keeps the door open. Okay? Anyways, with that said, I'm going to let you guys go. Keep the door open. Keep love alive. You know, the question was, how long is this grief going to last? I want you to ponder on that as we come back in the next week, and we'll talk more on the subject of grief. We all have to deal with it. Okay? Love you guys. And Father, I'm just praying for peace. I'm just praying for everyone out there who is dealing with loss or grieving, or, you know, dealing with relationships and things, you know, that they are learning to get better at. And I just pray for that to be, you know, just light and happy. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. Thank you for being here, guys. I love you guys. And I got to go to work. Bye.